Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would do this little video review that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be talking about two of the best fighters at the 135-pound division. One of the fighters, of course, that we're going to be talking about today, it was going to be that of Devin the Dream Haney. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure how much longer he has at 135 pounds. For his last fight against George Kambosos, he probably looked the most drained that I have personally ever seen him. I believe that he's still only 23, 24 years old, so his body still probably is going to continuously grow. I do not believe that he has many more fights there, if at all, when it comes down to it, but we'll see potentially what happens. But one of the more interesting fights that could potentially happen if Devin Haney is going to face someone at 135 pounds would be that of probably still one of the best fighters in the world, Mr. Vasily Lomachenko. Now, some people may say, well, how can you claim that Vasily Lomachenko is still one of the best fighters in the world? Because all in all, he's about 16-2, and on top of that, in his last 50-50 fight, he ended up losing. And that is true, but it is still very clear that Vasily Lomachenko, that he is a great fighter. I don't think that there's any debate about that. You can take a look at his resume, you can take a look at his skill set, you can take a look at what he can do. And unless we're talking about fighters that not only were very decent fighters like Tio and decently bigger than Lomachenko when it came down to it, or on top of that, a little bit early on in his career against Orlando Salido. Besides that, Vasily Lomachenko has been very decently dominant throughout his career. However, what I will say is this: if Vasily Lomachenko is going to be remembered as one of the all-time great fighters, he is going to have to get a string or a series of wins, in my opinion, against, a series of A-string fighters. I do not personally believe that the Vasily Lomachenko versus Devin Haney fight will happen. I just think that at this current moment in time, I don't think that it is going to be as possible as what it was before. It's very clear that Devin Haney more than likely is going to have to move up to 140 pounds. And Vasily Lomachenko, we already know that his next fight, I believe, is going to be either the end of this month or the end of next month in November. I can't necessarily remember. But either way, when it comes down to it, I'm going to talk about what I potentially think about a Vasily Lomachenko versus Devin Haney fight, as I've talked about it before, and also, in my opinion, what Devin Haney should do from here and what Vasily Lomachenko should do from here. And Dante's Boxing Nation is also going to talk about Paulie Malignaggi's most recent statement claiming that Vasily Lomachenko, that would have been the quote-unquote white boy that would have beat you. And do I agree with Paulie Malignaggi's statement? Well, what I'll say about, the situation is this. Do I believe that Vasily Lomachenko, as an all-around fighter, is more skilled than Devin Haney? Yes, personally, I do. And not everyone is going to agree with that statement. Look, I like Devin Haney. I think that he is a very solid fighter. But I think that once he starts moving up the weight classes, I do believe that he is going to have a little bit more trouble. Because Devin Haney, in my opinion, although he is a very, very decent fighter, what he reminds me of is a very bad, or excuse me, not a very bad, excuse me, but he reminds me of a Floyd Mayweather Jr. copy. Just not as sharp as what Floyd was, not as tight as what his defense was. I think he relies a lot on his speed and a lot on his length, but I'm going to be very curious to see how he handles certain fighters, the elite creme de la creme fighters at 140 pounds, maybe even 147, if he eventually moves up there. I'm going to be very interested. He's not a bad fighter by any means. He is a very decently great fighter, but I do think that there is a couple of flaws that may cost him in some of those fights if he's not careful. But we'll see. I don't know what ends up happening. Mainly that I think that his defense could be a little bit better. Now, he is very slick. He moves around very decently well. His feet are very good, and his head movement, all in all, is pretty damn good. But the fact that a lot of the times in certain exchanges he will get hit because at certain times he doesn't keep his hands up. You can see this in this fight, in the George Kambosos rematch. You also can mainly see it in the Jojo Diaz match and a little bit in the Jorge Linares fight. Devin Haney, in my opinion, is going to have to tighten up that defense. But we are going to talk about some of the possible fights that could potentially happen. But it is going to be very particularly interesting. Let's see what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say. Let's tune in.
I'm telling you, the shark is waiting for the Haney is Lomachenko. That's the shark waiting for Haney. But I don't think he's gonna fight Lomachenko. I don't see Haney cooperating. His last fight on the top rank deal, he's like, man, I ain't leaving you guys with the belt. I'm gonna vacate them and make my third fight on the top rank deal at 140 pounds, and you guys got to go clean up all those titles. But I gotta say it. That's the white boy that would have beat you, Lomachenko. Okay, so
now the mandatory challenger for Vasily Lomachenko's 135-pound title. Do you believe at 20 years old you're ready for that type of challenge?
I think you said his name wrong. It's Lomachenko because he doesn't want to fight me. But it's I feel like I'm ready for the fight. This is the WBC mandatory. So Lomachenko, come on, man, let's get this fight going.
A lot of guys have said they want Lomachenko. You're the next on that list.
Lomachenko.
My mistake. A lot of guys say they want him. What makes you believe that at this stage of your career you're ready for that type of fight?
Like I said, Abdulaev was the number 2, mandatory. I went in there, I destroyed him. He was no contest for me. If I'm so easy, Lomachenko should just fight me and get me out the way. If I'm so easy, Lomachenko should just fight me and get me out the way.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So this white boy comment that started with Devin Haney has really caused a ripple effect. The only person that it really affected was Malignaggi. It would be Paulie's response to Devin Haney saying, I would never lose to a white boy, that would ultimately get Paulie fired from Showtime. In response to Devin...
Well, listen, Dante, when it comes down to it, he likes to play these games where he'll overall, state certain derogatory terms, or there will be certain fighters that he tends to like that will say derogatory things. But then as soon as certain criticism or something derogatory comes right back, then overall he basically claims that, this person's a racist and all this other shit. And did Malignaggi, did what he say, was it controversial? Yes, in my opinion, it was. And do I necessarily agree with what he stated, at least from what I heard? No, not necessarily. But you must understand that when certain people say derogatory terms, sometimes people are going to throw derogatory terms right back at you. Dante's like that one girlfriend that always loves to bitch, moan, and complain, and then once the boyfriend has finally had enough and says, you know what, bitch, I'm tired of this shit. Then Dante ends up crying and says, why'd you say that? Why overall you get mad at me? That's what Dante is like. He bitches and moans about how all this racism happens, but 95% of the time he's putting out the same type of energy. So that's why a lot of the times I can't really take what Dante says seriously. But anyway.
And he's saying what he said. Paulie came out and he said that it is now the Eastern Europeans' time. It's no longer the time of the black fighter in the sport of boxing. In other words, he's saying that now Eastern Europeans dominate the sport and black fighters are pretty much on their way out. They're on the decline. So clearly the fact that he had these views when fighters like Errol Spence, Gervonta Tank Davis, the Charlo brothers, Floyd Mayweather, Stephen Fulton, and even Terrence Crawford, who's about to fight on PBC and Showtime, clearly the fact that Paulie Malignaggi had these views while he was covering all these black guys on the network was a conflict of interest. So Showtime, instead of just firing him right away, they actually gave Paulie Malignaggi an opportunity to apologize, and Paulie doubled down and refused to apologize, and that's how he ultimately got fired. And now that I surmised everything for you guys, you got more of an understanding why Paulie would come out of nowhere, sitting right next to Roy Jones, by the way, and pointing at the camera and say, that white boy Lomachenko would have beat you. And once again, I got to reiterate, Roy Jones is actually sitting there while Paulie is saying this, and the only thing Roy does is he just says, And this is clearly why Paulie Malignaggi has Roy Jones on his show. It's funny because racist people, they always think all they have to do is disguise their racism by, for example, if you have a TV show, if you have a podcast, what do? You bring a black person on the podcast with you, or you have a black co-host. For example, when it comes to HBO,
I would somewhat agree overall with what Dante is stating there. And you'll see that with a certain amount of celebrities, overall maybe Caucasian celebrities, that maybe they overall comment on certain racial issues, and you'll notice that they married overall a black woman, or certain overall people that want to comment on racial issues. They may have a podcast with a multitude of black overall, co-hosts when it comes down to it. I certainly do agree with what Dante's Boxing Nation is saying there. But Dante, once again, it's just so ironic him talking about racial issues. Because Dante, when it comes down to it, he doesn't even try to hide it when it comes down to it. He's very apparent with his racial issues. But anyway.
They always hired the likes of Roy Jones, Emmanuel Stewart, Lennox Lewis. When it comes to ESPN, what do? They hire Andre Ward. They hire Tim Bradley. Even when it comes to the most racist network in the world, Fox News, they hire some black commentators. It's the oldest trick in the book. It's the look. I'm not a racist.
You know, people always talk about Fox News overall like it has very, very big racial issues. And don't get me wrong, it more than likely does. But a lot of people also don't bring up CNN and a lot of these liberals. Dante is another one of these dudes that is super duper liberal, that believes that the liberals are on his side. The liberals are not on your side. If you're a minority, they do not give a shit about you. Those liberals behind the scenes are just as racist, if not even more racist, as the damn conservatives. If you actually take a look at most of the areas that are affecting black communities, such as certain abortion clinics and certain overall drugstores and a certain amount of other things, even the KKK, all these things were once upon a time instituted by the liberal parties. Okay, not saying whatsoever that conservatives, of course, that they don't have certain racial issues either, but liberals are not out for your safety either. They don't give a shit about you. Anyway.
This is because I have black friends.
And I'm not either conservative nor liberal. I really don't get into that shit. But it's just always so annoying to hear certain people talk about that. These liberals behind the scenes are half of the time the worst people overall that you'll come to find.
Trick. But you ain't tricking the intelligent people. So with that all being said...
Well, Dante, putting yourself and the word intelligent in the same sentence, I think is a little bit of a stretch. And there's no offense against you, but I don't think that a lot of the times you make the best points. I don't think that this was a bad point necessarily. But anyway.
At Paulie Malignaggi, he truly feels that Lomachenko will beat Devin Haney, and Devin is avoiding Vasyl Lomachenko. Even though Paulie Malignaggi, you've seen the clip that I played for you guys, he already knows that Devin Haney 3 years ago was Vasyl Lomachenko's mandatory. Paulie already knows that Lomachenko elected to vacate his belt rather than fight the 20-year-old mandatory Devin Haney. And I remember it because it was right before Paulie came out of the closet when it comes to being a racist. He was talking about the whole Lomachenko vacating his belt to become the franchise champion. And Paulie Malignaggi's only response was, come on, we all knew that Devin had no chance against Lomachenko. This is exactly...
Well, listen, what I'll state is this. I'm not going to 100% state that, in my opinion, that Lomachenko ducked Devin Haney, because when he did release his title, he later on went to go face Teofimo Lopez. So one could maybe say that facing Devin Haney, at least at that moment, was a little bit of a conflict of interest because he was looking for bigger fights. And Lomachenko, of course, wants to fight now. But, of course, it does have to be stated that Lomachenko did not seem super interested in giving Devin Haney that title shot. Now, is that 100% because I think Lomachenko was scared of Devin Haney? Maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, Devin Haney did seem to want the title shot. And Lomachenko did not seem to want to give it to him for whatever reason.
What he said. But if we're using that logic, why did Lomachenko fight all of the other mandatories that he fought right away? Because those guys had even less of a chance, way less of a chance of beating Lomachenko than Devin Haney did. So we know what time it is. It's just amazing to me that Paulie Malignaggi, he goes from saying, Loma didn't have to fight Devin Haney because we already knew what was going to happen. Now, all of a sudden, he's saying that Devin Haney is avoiding Lomachenko because he knows that he would have lost.
I agree on that. And what I'll say is this, in my opinion, that is not the fairest of points. Now, I did have one or two people come into my comment section and they stated, well, in my opinion, I don't think you're seeing the full picture because Devin Haney only signed with Top Rank once Lomachenko didn't have the belt and once Tio wasn't there. Well, listen, what I'll state is this. Devin Haney so far, at least according to me, at least with what I've seen, he has seemed to want to get into the ring with the big names. Now, you can claim all you want to that he was with DAZN, but one thing that I'll say about Devin Haney is this. DAZN is not necessarily the same thing as Showtime. DAZN has worked with both ESPN, and they've also worked without a Showtime in the PBC. And Lomachenko, at the end of the day, once again, he did not seem super interested in giving Devin Haney the title shot. That's not me 100% stating that Lomachenko did it because he was scared, but, maybe either Lomachenko, who knows, he could have been scared, or maybe he just thought that there was bigger fish to fry. But either way, at the time, Devin Haney did seem interested. So, it is what it is. In my opinion, that would be the fair analysis.
Now, FYI, for those of you guys who didn't know, the reason why it took so long for the Devin Haney versus Kambosos 2 fight to be announced, because Devin Haney, he was waiting to see if Lomachenko would actually take the fight. As soon as Lomachenko made it clear that he wasn't going to fight Devin Haney and decided to fight against Jermaine Ortiz, that's when Devin Haney finally announced his next fight to be against Kambosos in the rematch. Devin has been trying to get the Lomachenko fight for the longest. But finally, because of the position that Devin Haney put himself in when he sacrificed everything to fly over to Australia.
I agree with you there, Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation, and I have to give a round of applause to Mr. Devin Haney because he didn't pull some bullshit excuses out of his ass like a Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade or a Jamal Charlo, people that you claim, are being quote-unquote avoided, even though there's certain fights that they clearly could take right now and they're not doing it. Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade and Jamal Charlo have not put themselves in the position, or at least in a enough position, in my opinion, to get a Canelo Alvarez fight. Now, that's not me stating that I don't think that those fights shouldn't happen. But if you think that your opponent is a quote-unquote avoiding you, or if you just think that they're not primarily focused on you, you have to put yourself in an advantageous situation. That's the only thing that you can do. Really, that's the only thing that you can do in life in general. You can't just, if you're not happy in the position that you're in, you can't just sit back and bitch and moan about how crappy things are going. You have to actually do something about it. You have to try to improve your life. You have to put yourself in a valuable position, especially in the sport of boxing. And that's exactly what Devin Haney did. And now look, Vasily Lomachenko wants to fight him. All right, when previously he didn't seem all that focused on him. So I have to give a round of applause to Mr. Devin Haney because he did the exact right things to do. Unlike Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, who may pull out of certain fights or are not interested in top contenders or other top contenders that they could potentially face and are hiding behind the fact of, oh, well, I want to just fight Canelo Alvarez. That's well and good. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to face some other top contenders or put yourself in a very valuable position, more than likely for that fight to happen. Depending on, what the main target that you're after is mainly focused on. So Devin Haney did the absolute right thing in this situation.
And take less money, Devin finally put himself in a position to where he can pretty much force a Lomachenko fight. If it wasn't for Devin Haney taking the George Kambosos fight, he would have never became undisputed, and Lomachenko, he would have never fought Devin Haney.
Well, I would say all in all that Lomachenko, that perhaps he would have been focused on bigger targets, but you could argue that. I wouldn't necessarily have a huge issue with that. But certainly Lomachenko obviously is much more interested now that Devin Haney is in a much more viable position. Just like Errol Spence Jr., when nobody at one point in time wanted to fight him, now all of a sudden Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia and Sean Porter are all interested in fighting him. So basically what the lesson here is that whether you think your opponent is avoiding you or not, or whether that is the truth or not, sometimes it's not, about avoidance. Sometimes it can just be because, the fighter is focused on something else, or they may be focused on another type of fight or another type of opponent. But either way, if the fights aren't happening that you want to happen, you're going to sometimes have to slowly climb up the ladder. You're going to have to put yourself in more valuable positions. And that's exactly what Devin Haney did.
Roads lead to Devin Haney, and Loma really has no choice but to fight him. Devin had already said on multiple interviews leading up to the Kambosos rematch, the fight he wants the most is the Lomachenko fight because he feels that's the fight he's going to get the most credit from, and I completely agree. Not to mention Paulie Malignaggi, he also just made that point very clear. So now I'm really looking forward to seeing the Lomachenko versus Jermaine Ortiz fight, and I want to see if this is going to be the fight that's going to be made next, because ESPN and Top Rank, they've made it very clear that they really, really want the Haney versus Lomachenko fight. So I look forward to...
I would love to see that fight. I would really, really love to see that fight. That's a very excellent fight. If you're asking me who personally I would favor, I believe that Lomachenko is the more skilled of the two, but because Devin Haney also was very decently skilled and the size, and I'm not really quite sure how well Lomachenko is going to handle that, I probably would have to favor Devin Haney by a little bit. But Lomachenko, once again, this is going to be a great, thing to see how great he truly is within this part of his career. Because right now, I think that Lomachenko clearly is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think that he clearly, all in all, is a great fighter. But how great are you? Because right now, in my opinion, you're kind of on the same level as, well, I don't know if, how I could really compare it. But he'd be on that same level, in my opinion, probably as a Keith Thurman or someone, on that level. Someone who was a very clear A-grade fighter during the day. But you kind of have to win some of the bigger 50-50 fights in your career as well. Now, he did do that. He did beat Nicholas Walters. He also, I believe, beat, Guillermo Morgandao. He beat Gary Russell Jr. So it's not like Lomachenko has never won a big fight in his career. But Shakur Stevenson, Gervonta Tank Davis, and Devin Haney, those are going to be the real, true tests of the latter part of your career. Can he beat him? We'll have to see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Or overall, we'll let the video finish out. But I just thought that was very particularly interesting.
And Devin Haney announced that will be his next fight. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this.
But anyways, that's really about it for today. Overall, let's see what happens with Mr. Devin Haney and Vasily Lomachenko. If I had to guess what happens next, I could see the fight happening. I also could not see the fight happening. It will depend, in my opinion, on how well Devin Haney can truly make 135 at this point in time. That will be very, very particularly interesting. And Lomachenko, if he does accept that fight, he will have to be careful and he will have to make adjustments because he is not a natural, he's not even a natural 135 pounder. And Devin Haney is not a natural 135 pounder. He's at least a 140 pounder at the very least. So Lomachenko, in my opinion, would have a very uphill battle. But it'd be very particularly interesting. But anyways, that's really about it for today. I just thought that'd be very particularly interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.